like those splines are lined up. You guys saw what the splines look like, right? They're just straight up and down lines. A few different ways to do this. We have an actual stud installer, which is nice. This has like a tapered concave, I guess you would call it, inner kind of edge there, and this has a bearing here. Okay, so we're going to use the lug nut to install this stud. Ideally, I would use a lug nut that was not actually from the car, but I don't know if I've got any laying around right now, so we're going to use one from the car. If you didn't have an actual stud installer, and I would put a washer behind this, so pretty much we're going to put this around the stud. Again, try to get it where it feels like it's lined up. We're going to put that on there. We'll put the lug nut on here, and we'll tighten the lug nut. And by tightening the lug nut, it's going to pull the stud through. So while we're tightening it, we're just going to kind of watch on the back until that stud is sucked tight. And then we're done. That's it. We'll get the brakes back on. So really, you could do this. If I wasn't sitting here talking about it, like we'd be done by now, right? It's not a very long job. If we didn't have one of these, I'll show you the kind of, maybe I shouldn't, but the kind of old school way to do it. It works, but it's just not quite as good. If you took like an axle nut or something, an old axle nut, you can still put that on here. And then put the lug nut here, tighten it. The thing is, it doesn't have a bearing in it, so the lug nut's gonna get all chewed up when it spins up there. So the point of having a stud installer with the bearing on it is while we're turning the lug nut, the stud installer can turn too. So the lug nut's not just spinning inside of here and getting all chewed up. So, get my 21. These lug nuts too. This is a brand new lug nut, but it's an aftermarket one, like from Napa. It says it's supposed to be a 21 millimeter head on it. The threads are 12 millimeters by 1.5. But the nut accepts a 21 millimeter socket, which is standard for Asian cars. Put a 21 on here, and this is what we were looking at yesterday with Julius and Julio. It'd work, but this is loose. Like that's not good. So you take a 13/16, which is a standard size, and it fits like a glove. So I think that it's just the aftermarket lug nuts are just, I don't know, kind of crappy, but I would use this one because it fits better. But really, the factory lug nuts from this car, a 13/16 socket would be a little too small. They're very close in size, 13/16 and 21 millimeters, but the 13/16 is smaller. Anyway. We'll see with that car. Okay, so I'm going to get this set up here. This one, especially since I don't want this stuff to really move, because what you don't want to do is tighten these studs when the splines are not lined up. Basically, the splines, guys, they should like lock together so they would fit together like this, right? If we tried to start it when the splines were like hitting each other, something's gonna give. Hopefully the stud would turn a little until they lock in, but it's possible that they would just kind of smush together and flatten each other out, and then the stud would spin, and then we would need a new hub, which we don't really want to go there. The hub on this is part of the wheel bearing, so we would actually need a whole wheel bearing. Anyway, I think that this is pretty good here. Let's see what happens. size one is set it to 58 foot-pounds. And then, like I was explaining to one of you guys the other day, when we put a rotor like this back on, we want to make sure, we want to make sure that we put it back the same way that it was on there before. Now I didn't like make a mark or anything, which you could, if you weren't sure, like if you wanted to, you could put a mark on a stud and then put a mark here, like with a chalk marker or a paint pen or something. But we can tell by pretty much the rust marks that were left if you look at these holes here. I mean, well, there's holes this size in between every stud, which is good because we got this rubber plug here. This rubber plug sticks through. If we put this lined up on a spot where it hit metal instead of a hole, then that rotor wouldn't be on there flush anymore. And you would get a vibration. You know, probably only when you hit the brakes, hopefully. But also, these other holes here, there's only 2 of these, right? And if you look where they're lined up here, there's rust. A little bit of rust built up. And that could also be enough where if we didn't get this rotor back the same way we took it off, that could be enough to make it not sit flush as well and give you a vibration in your brake. If we're not cleaning up the hub, which I'm not because we're not doing brakes, and it's not super rusty or anything, I'm just going to try to put it back the same way. So I can tell where that hole was. There was one here and one here. So I'm just going to make sure that it goes back the same way. And this plug here, guys, what that's for, if we were unable to get the brakes off, we can unadjust the parking brake through here. And you might have to get the rotor off. So there is, like when we were talking about the drum brakes yesterday, there's a self-adjuster down here. So if this rotor, you can tell, actually, see how it's rusty on the inside, and then it's kind of cleaner here, the metal. But then there's another area of rust here. Call it the rust ridge. Sometimes that rust will build up. So it'll be like the area where the shoes are down here, and then there's a rust ridge like that. So if that rust was built up, you wouldn't be able to just pull the rotor off like we were able to. So if that was the case, then we would have to unadjust these brake shoes. So basically we would be taking them and moving them in. So then the rotor would clear that rust ridge and we could remove it. But the only way to do that is through the front, so that's why they put that plug here. Okay. Now we'll put it back. Down there. Hopefully this just slides back on. Usually this should be a pretty grading job like this. Everything's going smooth, which I shouldn't have said. Sometimes stuff fights you though, you know? Especially in Wisconsin where we've got so much rust out there. We're on the hard salt on the road. Same thing with these bolts. I just start them like 2 turns, so I know they're not cross-threaded, right? And then I'm going to kind of snug them up with the impact at the same time. But I'm not going to tighten them all the way, or really even close. I can probably turn this back down. Because 58 foot-pounds is not that tight, right? It's not that loose either. so much for having everything I needed out. But really, you don't want to use a torque wrench with a swivel socket on it. That's going to mess up your torque rating. So we need a 17 for easy drive fun.
It's all down there.
And then we just hope we can get it in there.
I'm keeping up.
Because there's a bunch of stuff in the way. Oh, I think the bottom.
Send it to me too, alright? So I'm stuck here.
And we could have put this back up in the air, right? We don't have to be like on our knees doing this stuff. But time is money, right? That one's good. Oh, nice. I can get at it. Right. So we were able to get this in there, right, with just a straight socket on it. But I wouldn't have been able to fit the impact in here with a straight socket. That's why I use the impact swivel on there. It saves you a ton of time. Swivel sockets are expensive, but they really save time, for sure. Okay, now we can put the wheel on. Okay. So that's it. That's all there is to it. The only thing otherwise, and you guys that have done brakes know, we didn't really have to compress the piston at all. But if you do, which I'm kind of surprised we didn't, if we ever compress that piston, what happens, guys, when you get in the car before you drive it, after you do a brake job? What you got to do before you drive it? You got to pump the brakes up, right? Because there is going to be no brake pedal. I almost ran a guy over the first brake job I did, I think, at a shop. Because I forgot to do that. Forgot to pump the pedal. Put the car in reverse to pull it off of the hoist. Pedal went all the way to the floor and the car didn't slow down. I was like, oh shit, oh shit. Put it back in drive because I was going to hit something behind me. Sitting there pumping the pedal and there's a dude, I might have told you guys. There's a guy that I work with, like the master tech at the shop. He was sitting on a stool watching, or not watching, but he was looking at all data or whatever. His car's coming at him, and I'll never forget his face because he turned around. He's just scared shitless. Trying to get up off of the stool real quick. He couldn't move real fast. I stopped in time. I would have put it back in reverse before I hit him, but I'll never forget the way the look on his face because the car was coming. It was coming. It was only a couple feet away from him. He would have got pinned between a Ford Taurus and a workbench like that. That was when there was Ford Tauruses everywhere. All right, cool. I just wanted to show you guys that stuff. Okay. So let's just have a seat real quick, and we'll figure.